The vinyl hissed before the music started, a sound older than my son and twice as honest. I sat on the edge of the narrow bed in my room at Crestview Senior Living, the afternoon sun slanting in weakly through beige curtains. My knees ached, my fingers were stiff, but the notes still floated out, scratchy but faithful. Lonesome Highway, Track 3, Side B. We'd recorded it in a garage outside of Cedar Falls with a borrowed mic and a fridge humming in the background. Now it lived in a record player with duct tape on the lid and a silence too big for its speakers. No one had asked for this album in decades. Not at the local record store, not at bar reunions, not even my own son Julian. The first time he heard it, he snorted. It's like if Bob Dylan forgot how to sing. He was 14. I laughed it off. But when he was 30 and said the same thing over dinner with his fiancée, it lodged deeper than I let on. "You were in a band, right?" she'd asked, smiling politely. Julian smirked before I could answer. Dad and his friends played county fairs and thought they were rock stars. Their big hit was about a truck breaking down in the rain. It was about loss, I said, but they were already laughing. Now, years later, I sat in a room paid for by my pension and Medicare, watching dust swim in the light. My guitar stood in the corner like a forgotten photograph. I hadn't played it in months, maybe longer. My hands didn't move like they used to. I told myself it was age, but maybe it was shame. Marion, the night nurse, said I should get out more. She meant bingo or crafts, or that sad attempt at chair yoga they ran on Tuesdays. I used to move a crowd. Back in '72, we opened for a band called Silver Railroad. They had one song on AM radio, and we rode the coattails for a summer. Rick was on bass, Thomas on keys, Donnie on drums. I was lead guitar and vocals, Pete Harmon and the Southbound Sons. We were loud, poor, and endlessly certain. Then came the marriages, the babies, the mortgages. We faded into Sunday shifts and small-town expectations. Rick got a job with the city. Thomas moved to Omaha to sell insurance. Donnie bought a tire shop. I stayed in Des Moines and taught high school music until they phased the program out. And now this, tea and paper cups, a window that doesn't open, a call bell I never touch. Julian visited once a week, brought coffee, stayed 15 minutes, talked about stocks or his latest project. I nodded, smiled, didn't mention the record. Last week he brought a brochure for a newer facility, more amenities, he'd said, like I was booking a hotel. I didn't look at it. The record stopped. I didn't flip it. Instead, I stood, slow, careful, and crossed to the guitar. My hand hovered near the strings. My reflection in the glass was older than I remembered. Someone knocked. I opened the door to find a woman in a denim jacket and a clipboard, mid-40s, windblown hair, no-nonsense expression, softened by curiosity. "Pete Harmon?" I nodded. "I'm Molly Keene. I run the Des Moines Folk and Roots Festival. We're doing a special segment this year, Legends of the Local Scene. Your name came up more than once." I blinked. "We'd love for you to reunite the Southbound Sons. One last show, if you're willing." My mouth was dry. I hadn't seen Rick or the others in decades. My voice cracked when I finally spoke. "They're still around?" "Mostly. I already found Rick. He's interested." I stepped back, heart fluttering in a way that wasn't medical. "Let me think about it." Molly smiled. "I'll come by next week. Bring a flyer." When she left, I sat down, guitar in my lap. I didn't play, not yet, but I held it. And in that silence something returned, something that looked a lot like me. It sat heavy in my lap, familiar and foreign all at once. The neck of the guitar felt smoother than I remembered. The strings were dull and out of tune, but they buzzed faintly beneath my fingertips like a living thing trying to speak again. I didn't strum. Not yet. I just held it the way I used to hold my son when he was small, gently, as if any sudden movement might waken old pain. For the next few days, I didn't mention the visit to anyone, not to Marion, not to the other residents, not to Julian, especially not to Julian. I moved slower, more deliberate, like memory could bruise me. The guitar stayed by the bed. Every morning I woke before sunrise, sat in the same chair, drank the same bitter coffee, and stared at the same beige wall. The room smelled of carpet shampoo and stale toast, but the strings in the corner whispered something else. Nights on back porches, bar lights, the smell of beer and Pinewood stages, Rick's laughter in the van as we drove to nowhere. Back then I thought time was a wide river and I could swim it forever. Now I knew better. The truth is, we hadn't ended. We'd just stopped calling. Life blurred the lines until we weren't musicians anymore, just men in jobs with memories. Rick used to call every Christmas. Thomas sent me a card the year his wife passed, Donnie. I hadn't heard from in 12 years. Last I knew, he'd moved north, maybe to Sioux Falls or Grand Forks. What scared me wasn't that I didn't know where they were. What scared me was the creeping thought that maybe they didn't care. Molly returned the next Friday with a thick folder and 2 takeout coffees. One was black, no sugar, bless her for not assuming, and the other smelled of cinnamon. I figured you might want some details before you say yes, she said, settling onto the edge of the armchair like someone who didn't much like sitting still. Did Rick say yes? I asked. He said maybe. I smiled. That sounded like Rick. She opened the folder and spread out some printouts, photos of the old festival stages, a calendar of events, even a possible lineup spot on Sunday afternoon. You wouldn't be headlining. It's not like the old days, but people remember. I looked down at a grainy photo from the 80s. There we were, tight jeans, bad haircuts, sunglasses at night. I hadn't known I looked that alive. Someone really remembered us? 3 someones, she said. An old radio host, a woman who booked you at the Elks Lodge in '79, and my uncle. He had your record. Still does. I sat back. Julian didn't even own a record player. I could feel something rising behind my ribs, slow and dangerous, a heat I hadn't felt in years. Not anger, not yet, but something close. Do you know where Thomas is? I asked. He's in Omaha, owns an auto insurance office, still plays piano on weekends. And Donnie? Her expression shifted. Donnie's in a VA home in Sioux Falls, PTSD. He's slower than he used to be. But he asked about you. I closed my eyes. Donnie had always been the wild one. He laughed hardest, played loudest, broke hearts with a smile, and now he was in a home, like mine. What do you want from us, Molly? She paused, then said softly, I want you to remind people that music doesn't expire, that maybe we forget the faces, but not the sound. I want people to feel what you made them feel back then. I nodded, more to myself than to her. I'll call Rick, I said, then Tomas, then we'll see. When she left, I placed the folder next to the record player, then I picked up the guitar, tuned it by ear, badly but enough, and let one chord ring out. It buzzed in the stillness like an old promise kept. The chord hung there for a few seconds, imperfect and raw, and then dissolved into the bland hum of the heating vent. I sat still, hand resting over the strings, listening for what might come next. But the only thing that followed was the quiet throb of memory. Later that evening, I took out my old Rolodex. I hadn't touched it in years. The cards were yellowing, the ink faded, but Rick's number was still there, scrawled in my handwriting, back when I thought permanent meant forever. I called. It rang longer than I expected. Yeah? His voice was gruffer, older, but still unmistakable. It's Pete, I said. Pete Harmon. A beat passed. Well, I'll be damned. We spoke for an hour. Not about the festival, not yet. Just catching up. Grandkids, knees, the way coffee gives you heartburn after 60. He told me his wife passed 2 winters ago. I told him Pearl's been gone almost 5. Neither of us said much more after that. Then I said, Molly Keene came by, Des Moines Folk and Roots, wants us to play. Another pause. Play what? I smiled. Come on, Rick. I haven't touched a bass in years. You used to say it was just part of your body. He snorted. That was before arthritis. Still, he didn't say no. I'm calling Thomas next, I added. You in? He hesitated. Let me sleep on it. But Yeah, maybe. If you're really doing it, I think I am. After we hung up, I sat with the receiver still in my hand. I hadn't felt this awake in years. That night I barely slept, my fingers twitching with remembered chords and calluses long gone. In the morning I called Thomas. His receptionist patched me through. "Pete," he said, "are you okay?" "I'm fine," I said, "but I need to ask you something stupid." "Then it must be important." I explained about Molly, the festival, Rick's maybe. There was a silence on the line, long enough that I thought he'd hung up. Then, "You know I still have that Rhodes, the electric piano. I figured you might. I don't know if it works. We could find out." He sighed. "My hands are clumsy. I'm not who I was. Neither am I." He exhaled slowly, and I could almost hear the soft click of decision behind it. "Okay, for one show. I'll need a week to shake off the dust." That left Donnie. I hadn't spoken to him since the accident. He never answered my letters, and when I called the home, they always said he wasn't available. But now, with Molly's help, I had a contact. A nurse named Reggie agreed to set up a video call. I didn't recognize the man on the screen at first. His hair was gone, his face thinner. But then he grinned, a lopsided boyish thing that cracked right through time. And it was him. "Pete Harmon," he rasped. "Didn't think I'd ever see your ugly mug again." "I missed that voice," I said, trying not to stare at the wheelchair. "You better have. I was the damn heartbeat of that band." "You still are." He tilted his head. "Why now?" "There's a festival, one last set." He stared at me a long time. "You think we still matter?" "I do." He tapped a finger slowly against the table. "I can't play standing up anymore." "You won't have to." He laughed. "God help us." "All right, let's scare some kids." We hung up, and I sat back, stunned. All of them. They'd all said yes. And just like that, the past wasn't a shadow anymore. It was a set list waiting to be written. I found the notebook in the bottom drawer of my nightstand, spiral-bound, worn at the corners, the cover still flecked with dried beer from some basement gig in 1981. Inside were scribbles, chord diagrams, lyrics half-written in drunken scrawl. Some songs we played 100 times. Others never left the page. I flipped through the pages slowly, careful not to tear anything. Every now and then I found a line that made me stop. She left her perfume in my truck, and I kept the scent like guilt. Or, we tuned our hearts to the sound of leaving. I didn't know if they were any good, but they were true, and that mattered more. I spent the next few days rewriting the set list by hand. 7 songs, no filler, no pandering. Just what we were, what we'd been. I mailed copies to Rick and Thomas. Molly promised to bring Donnie his in person. Her text came in with updates. Stage time confirmed, tech check scheduled, press release drafted. I asked her to hold the press. "This isn't about attention," I told her. "It's about the sound." "Understood," she said. "But don't be surprised if people remember you." I didn't know whether that comforted me or not. I didn't tell Julian. He'd come by on Wednesday as usual, walked in, set his coffee on the windowsill like he always did, scanned the room. "What's with all the papers?" he asked, eyeing the open folder on my desk. "Just some old music," I said. He smirked. "You still working on that time machine?" "Something like that." Julian never liked silence. He filled it with business updates, renovation plans, golf stories. I nodded in the right places. I didn't say that I'd started practicing every morning, fingers trembling but obedient, or that Thomas and Rick were meeting me at Molly's rented studio on Saturday. I didn't say I'd booked a local kid named Sean to fill in rhythm where Donnie might need backup, or that Lydia had asked if she could come to the festival after overhearing Molly's name on the phone. Julian didn't need to know everything. Not yet. That Saturday, I stepped into the studio with a heart beating faster than it had in months. Rick was already there, warming up on his old Fender. He looked leaner, grayer, but when he nodded at me, I saw the same glint he used to get before we played dive bars full of strangers. Thomas came in late, juggling sheet music and a thermos. He wore a tie, as if professionalism could hide how nervous he was. We didn't talk much. We just played. The first run was rough. Timing off, fingers stiff. Donnie's voice crackled through the monitor from Sioux Falls, coaching Sean on tempo, throwing out jokes between instructions. By the third run, something clicked. Rick's bass fell into rhythm like a second pulse. Thomas's chords softened, found their weight. My voice, well, it cracked, but it held, and in that small space, we felt it again. The shift, the pull. When we finished, no one said anything for a long time. Then Thomas muttered, "Damn, I missed this." We ran the set twice more. Before I left, I looked at the mirror in the studio's hallway. My reflection was wrinkled, yes, but not small, not faded. Julian called that night. "Dad, Lydia said something about a festival?" "She's excited," I said, keeping my voice level. "What festival?" "The Folk and Roots, end of the month." There was silence on the other end. "You're playing?" I paused. "I am." He laughed, not unkindly, more like disbelief wrapped in worry. "You're serious." "I'm alive," I said, and for once, I meant it. Julian didn't respond right away. I could hear him breathing, like he was trying to decide whether I was joking or having a crisis. "That's not funny, Dad." "I'm not joking." "You're playing at a festival with your band?" "Yes," he scoffed. "You can't just dig up the past and expect it to work like it used to. This isn't high school. You're 74. 75 next month. That's not the point." "No," I said quietly. "It isn't." He let out a long sigh, and I could picture him rubbing his forehead like he did when traffic was bad or Lydia got a bad grade. "I just don't get it. What's the point?" "You don't even like attention." "It's not about that." "Then what?" I hesitated, not because I didn't know the answer, but because saying it would make it real. "It's about remembering who I was before I forgot. Before you all helped me forget." "That's not fair," he said, his voice tight. "Isn't it?" There was silence again. He finally muttered, "Do what you want," and hung up. I stared at the phone for a while, then set it down slowly. My hand didn't shake, not this time. The next rehearsal came and went. The sound grew tighter. Rick brought in his grandson to record us on an old 4-track. Thomas smiled more, even cracked a joke about groupies. Donnie asked for video every night, and I sent it without fail. Molly watched us from the doorway sometimes, arms crossed, half smiling. She didn't interfere, just listened. One day she asked if we wanted a tech crew or preferred to run raw. "Raw," I said. "Let it sound like us." The night before the festival, I sat on my bed, polishing the old guitar with a cloth pearl once used to clean her violin. It still smelled faintly of lemon oil and varnish. Outside, the wind moved through the trees like a low chord. I thought about what Julian said, about digging up the past. He wasn't entirely wrong. I'd spent years putting myself away, shrinking. After Pearl died, I stopped singing in the shower. I stopped strumming without purpose. I stopped being someone who made noise. I let myself become convenient. And now, I was inconvenient again. Good. On the morning of the festival, I woke early, dressed in a black shirt, jeans that still fit, and boots with the soles worn just right. I took a long look in the mirror. The man staring back had crow's feet and thinning hair, but his spine was straight. Lydia met me outside the venue. She wore a denim jacket covered in buttons and a wide, proud grin. "You nervous?" she asked. "A little." I told all my friends. I said, "My grandpa's playing the festival." They didn't believe me, but they will. She hugged me, tight. Then she handed me a small paper bag. "What's this?" "Cough drops," she said, "in case your voice gets tired." I laughed and tucked them into my jacket pocket. Rick was already backstage, tuning his bass. Thomas sipped tea, eyes closed, humming through the scales. Donnie's video monitor sat on a table, his face framed and alert. "Break a hip, boys," he joked. The curtain lifted slowly. The lights were softer than I remembered. The crowd wasn't massive, but it was real. Rows of people, young and old, leaning forward. Thomas counted us in. 1, 2, 3. And just like that, We were back. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. My voice cracked on the bridge of Rivertown. Thomas missed a key change in the second song, and Rick's amp hummed with static through the final chorus. But we held the line. People clapped before the songs ended. Some even stood. I caught eyes glistening in the second row, an older couple swaying gently to the beat, and there, leaning against the far railing, was Molly, arms crossed and nodding, mouthing the words to Lonesome Highway, like she'd lived them. But I didn't see Julian. I hadn't expected him to come. After our last call, his silence felt heavier than his words ever had. We played our final song, Back Again, a tune we'd written in '74 after a snowstorm canceled a tour and left us stranded in a motel outside Ames. It was slow, a little melancholy, and it ended on a long, fading chord. No fireworks, just quiet gratitude. We bowed together, me, Rick, Thomas, and Donnie on the monitor, his hand raised in a thumbs up. For a moment I forgot about the years between. We were 22 again, sweat-soaked, smiling, hearts thudding like snare drums. Backstage, Molly handed us towels and grinned like a coach after a championship win. "You did it," she said. "You all did it." Rick laughed. "Hell, my back's going to punish me for a week, but it was worth it." Tomas just wiped his eyes. I sat down, catching my breath. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving my joints aching, but my chest light. Then I saw him, Julian. He stood by the exit, hands in his jacket pockets, face unreadable. For a moment I thought he'd turn and leave, but he didn't. He walked toward me, slow and cautious, like he was approaching a wild animal, or maybe someone he didn't recognize. "You came," I said. He looked down, then back at me. I didn't think I would, but Lydia sent me a video. "And?" He shrugged. "You sounded better than I expected." I smiled faintly. "That's as close to a compliment as I've ever gotten from you." "She said she was proud," he added. I forgot you were someone before me." That stopped me. He sat beside me on the bench, shoulders tight. "I always thought you were just this strict, quiet guy who kept everything bottled up. You never talked about your music or anything before Mom. Would you have listened?" He looked away. Maybe not. But I would have remembered. We sat in silence for a while, the murmur of the dispersing crowd filtering in from the front. "I didn't do this to prove anything," I said. "Then why?" "Because I needed to hear myself again, before I'm gone." He nodded slowly. "I get that now." Rick and Thomas waved as they passed, calling promises to meet up next week, maybe even record something. Donnie's monitor had been packed away, but Molly promised to send him the footage. When it was just the two of us, Julian said, "So what now? You going to go back to retirement?" "I might do this again." "You mean keep playing?" Maybe something smaller." "Local sets. There's a bar near Crestview with an open mic night." He laughed, a real laugh this time. "You on open mic night? I'd pay to see that." "You just might." He stood and offered me his hand. "Come on, Dad. Let me buy you a coffee." For once. I took it, bones creaking but firm. As we walked out into the evening air, the sounds of the festival still lingering behind us, I realized something had shifted. Not just in the music, not just on stage, something between us, that something was quiet, unspoken. Not forgiveness exactly, not yet, but a softening around the edges. Julian didn't rush ahead like he used to. He matched my pace, even held the door at the cafe like he'd remembered I was older, slower. We sat by the window. He ordered a cappuccino. I took black, as always. Outside, the last of the festival crowd wandered past with cotton candy and fold-up chairs. "I told Lydia she could stay up late tonight," he said, smiling into his cup. "She thinks you're a rock star." I chuckled. "She's got poor judgment. She's got better ears than I did at her age." I watched him for a moment. His hands looked like mine once did, broad, steady, made for holding things that mattered. I wondered if he ever played anything, but I didn't ask. Instead I said, "You know, you laughed when you heard that old record." "I know. You laughed in front of everyone." He looked down. I was embarrassed. He admitted. It sounded old. I didn't get it. You didn't want to. He nodded. I think I thought you'd wasted your time, that all those years, all those stories, were just some version of failure. That hurt more than it should have, even now. But I stayed quiet. I didn't know what it meant to make something, he continued. Not really. I just saw you as someone who gave up. And now? He took a long sip, set the cup down, and met my eyes. Now I see you didn't give up. You gave what you had to the people who couldn't hear it. That stayed with me, because it was true. Pearl, may she rest, always said I gave too much and asked too little. She said one day I'd disappear inside someone else's silence. Julian broke that silence finally, but not before I'd had to fight my way out of it. You were always in control, I said, of the house, the schedule, the future. I let you take it because I thought that was love. He looked startled. I didn't mean to. I know. We sat for a while after that. I watched him age 10 years in 5 minutes. The boy who mocked my lyrics, who treated me like a relic, he was still there. But so was the man trying to come back from it. Before we left, I reached into my coat pocket and handed him a folded piece of paper, a photocopy of our original set list, the one I'd scribbled lyrics on years ago. He unfolded it slowly. This was your handwriting? Still is. He traced his finger over a line near the bottom. I'll play it again if someone's still listening. That's the line you opened with last night. It is. He folded the paper carefully and slipped it into his coat. At the door, he hesitated. Do you want me to drive you home? I shook my head. No, I want to walk. He opened the door and the air outside was cooler now, night settling in. We didn't hug. That wasn't us. But he touched my shoulder as I passed, gentle and strange. I made it halfway down the street before I stopped and looked back. He was still standing there, watching. That night, back in my room, I put the guitar back in its case, not to hide it, just to let it rest. My fingers ached in the familiar way that made them feel like mine again, and for the first time in decades I dreamed in sound, not memory, not regret. Music. The next morning felt different, like I'd woken up inside a softer world. The hallway didn't feel like a tunnel anymore. The silence in my room didn't echo the way it used to. Even the coffee tasted less like habit and more like choice. I didn't rush to get dressed. I let the warmth of morning roll over me, the light spilling across the bed like a stage still cooling after the show. Crestview had its routines. They expected me at breakfast, at group discussion, at some planned activity. But that day, I skipped all of it. I took my guitar out of the case and sat by the window, just me, the strings, and the faint hum of the city beyond the glass. I played softly, not full songs, just pieces, little echoes of what we'd made. My fingers fumbled some notes, but the intention was there, and in those moments, intention felt more important than polish. I don't know how long I sat like that. Time fell away. I was just a man with 6 strings and something left to say. That afternoon, Molly stopped by unannounced. I brought something, she said, holding up a small brown envelope. Inside was a black and white photo. Us on stage. Thomas mid-chord, Rick squinting into the lights, me leaning into the mic, eyes closed. Donnie's image projected on the curtain behind us, grinning like a teenager. I thought you should have a copy. I turned it over. Written in blue ink, Southbound Sons, Folk and Roots Festival, Des Moines 2025. I placed it on the desk beside the record player. I can't thank you enough, I said. You don't have to, she replied. You gave us something we didn't know we were missing. Then she asked something that surprised me. Have you ever thought about teaching? I raised an eyebrow. I mean it, she said. There's a youth center in town. They've got donated instruments, a soundproof room, but no one to guide the kids, not with heart, not with what you've lived. I didn't answer right away. I'm not young, I said finally. No, you're better than that. After she left, I sat with the idea. It felt strange, being needed again, not as a relic, not as a story, but as a person. Later that evening, Lydia came to visit. No Julian this time, just her. "I brought cookies," she announced, holding up a Tupperware box. "They're half burned, but I tried." We sat on the floor, eating too many of them, talking about the set list, the stage, the feeling. She asked about Donnie, about what it was like recording on tape, about how I met Thomas and Rick. I told her everything. She listened like it was church. When I walked her out, she turned on the steps and said, "You looked really happy up there." I was. "I hope you stay that way." That night, I called Molly. "I'll do it," I said. "The teaching." She was quiet for a second. "You sure?" "I need to give something forward. You already have. I want to do it again." When I hung up, I sat back in my chair, guitar still by the window, photo on the desk. The sun had gone down, but I didn't close the blinds. The darkness wasn't heavy anymore. It was full of space, and in that space, something grew, quietly. No rush, no pressure, just a slow unfolding, like fingers unlearning stiffness, like breath, rediscovering rhythm. 2 weeks passed since the festival, and the world didn't shrink back. It stayed open. The youth center was a few blocks from Crestview, tucked behind a fire station and a laundromat. On the outside, it looked like a leftover brick shell from the 70s. Inside, it pulsed with the energy of kids who hadn't yet learned how to doubt themselves. Molly introduced me as Mr. Pete, who used to tour with a band and once made a crowd cry with just 4 chords. That last part wasn't true, but the kids leaned in anyway. The room had an upright piano with chipped keys, a second-hand drum set with a cracked cymbal, and 2 battered acoustic guitars that still held tune if you were patient. I didn't start with theory. I didn't hand out chord charts. Instead, I asked, "What does your day sound like?" They stared. One girl raised her hand, like a phone vibrating in a pocket. "Good," I said. "That's rhythm." A boy in the back said, "Like my mom yelling at my brother. That's pitch." And just like that, we were making music, not polished, not proper, but ours. On the walk back to Crestview that day, I passed a record store with a bin outside marked clearance. I paused, flipping through cracked covers and worn spines until I found a copy of our album, dusty, stained, but whole. 50 cents. I bought it. That night, I played it on my old record player, the one with the duct tape on the lid. I didn't cry. I didn't flinch at the missed notes or uneven mixing. I just listened, and I smiled. Marion noticed the change before anyone. "You're lighter," she said one morning, pouring my tea. "Like something let go of you." "Maybe I let go of it," I replied. I started joining the Tuesday chair yoga class, not because I liked it, but because it made me laugh, and sometimes laughter was more healing than music. I shared my cookies with neighbors. I showed one of the aides how to restring a guitar. I even asked Lydia to bring me a few of Julian's old CDs. "Surprise me," I said. She showed up with Bowie, Nirvana, and something electronic I couldn't name. I played them all. Julian didn't come for 3 weeks. When he finally did, he brought a plant. "For your windowsill," he said awkwardly. "Lydia said you needed something green. It was a peace lily. Its leaves were bowed but healthy." "You're watering it," I said, surprised. "I'm trying," he replied. We didn't talk about the festival. We didn't need to. He watched me tune my guitar that afternoon, didn't interrupt, just sat and listened. "I've been thinking," he said eventually, "about how I never asked." "Asked what?" "What any of it meant to you, the music, the band." "Even the silence after?" I nodded. "It's not too late." He looked up. "No?" "No," I said. "But it's better to listen now than regret later." He stayed longer that time, and when he left, I watered the peace lily, then wrote a new song. The chords were simple. The melody wasn't brilliant, but the chorus, when it came, felt like something opening, like the air after a long rain, like a porch light left on, like home. Lydia started showing up more often, at first just on weekends, then after school. Sometimes she brought a friend, sometimes just her sketch pad. She liked to sit cross-legged on the floor of my room, drawing with her earbuds in while I plucked at old melodies or scribbled lyrics on napkins. One Wednesday, she pulled out her earbuds mid-song. "Grandpa, why don't you write a song with me?" I looked up from my notebook. "You write songs?" "Not really," she said, "but I've got words, and you've got chords." It was the kind of offer I would have shrugged off once, but now I nodded. "Okay, let's try." She read me a line. "It's loud inside my head when the world goes quiet." "That's better than anything I wrote at 15, I said. She grinned. We spent the next hour piecing things together, my hands on the fretboard, her voice weaving words into melody. It wasn't polished, but it was real. And when we finished, she whispered, "I think I'll remember this forever." The next day, she told Julian. He came to visit that Saturday holding a guitar case I didn't recognize. It wasn't mine. "I want to play it," he said, lifting it slowly. The song, yours and Lydia's. He'd never asked to play before. "Do you remember the chords?" I asked. "I watched the video she took, figured it out." He played them, shaky but sincere. I sang the verse, Lydia joined on the chorus, and for a moment we weren't 3 generations trying to bridge years of silence. We were a band. Later, Julian lingered while Lydia went down to the rec room. "I should have listened sooner," he said. I didn't respond. I spent years building a life, assuming I'd already understood yours. "You were trying to be the adult," I said. "So was I," he laughed. Turns out we were both just sons trying not to disappoint our fathers. I looked at him, really looked, and saw not the boy who rolled his eyes at my old vinyl, but the man who drove across town to bring me music, who listened now instead of defending himself. "I'm proud of you," I said. He blinked, taken aback. Even after everything. Because of everything. We sat in that quiet for a while, and then he said, "If you ever want to record that song, I know someone. Small studio, no charge." "Thanks," I said. "But I think I already got what I wanted." "What's that?" "A moment that won't fade." That evening, I found Lydia's notebook left on my desk. Inside were sketches of us, me on the stool, guitar in hand, her mid-laugh, Julian with his brows furrowed, eyes soft. She'd drawn them like memories too vivid to forget. Tucked in the back was another line of lyrics not yet shared. If I could rewind the silence, I'd play it loud with you. I closed the notebook and set it beside the photo from the festival. The youth center was quieter the next week. The kids came in late, a few skipped. But I didn't mind. One girl stayed after, a quiet kid named Tara, who asked if she could show me something she wrote. I said yes. She played a song about her brother leaving for college, about silence at the dinner table, about missing someone before they're even gone. When she finished, I clapped. She blinked, startled, then smiled. "You wrote that?" I asked. She nodded. "Keep going," I said. "It's worth it." She left her lyrics behind by accident. I found them later that night, tucked into the bench of the upright piano. I didn't read them all, but the last line stuck with me. "Sometimes the softest sound is the one that stays." That line echoed in my head as I walked the length of the Crestview garden path later that evening. The flowers were half asleep in the dimming light, the pebbles beneath my shoes whispering their rhythm with each step. I thought about Tara, about Julian, about Lydia's lyrics and Molly's offer, about how this unexpected chapter of life had unfolded not with a bang, but a note, held, quiet, unwavering. That peace lasted all of 2 days. On the 3rd day, the letter came. It was tucked into my mail cubby, cream envelope, thick paper, no return address. I opened it in my room, expecting perhaps a thank you or an invitation. Instead, it was from Julian's wife, Melissa, polite-cold. She had concerns. She was worried the attention might be too much for a man of my age, that Lydia's education and well-being required stability, not the glorification of past dreams. She wanted to ensure, moving forward, boundaries were clear between family engagement and emotional influence. In other words, stop. Stop playing. Stop seeing Lydia so often. Stop being inconvenient. Stop reminding them I was more than a grandfather in a chair. I read the letter 3 times. Then I folded it and placed it on my nightstand. I didn't tell Lydia. Not yet. The next morning I found myself staring at the envelope again. The paper hadn't changed. The message hadn't softened. But something in me had. Years ago, I would have apologized, smoothed things over, made myself small. Now? I picked up the phone. Julian answered after 2 rings. Dad? Did you know Melissa sent me a letter? A pause, then, what? She has concerns, he exhaled. I didn't know she'd write you directly. But you agree with her? I didn't say that. You didn't have to. He was quiet, then softly. She's scared. Of what this might mean for Lydia, that she'll start dreaming too loud. She already does, I said, and she should. I know. Then tell her to stop sending warnings. I'm not your past to bury. I'm Lydia's present. Another pause. She won't like hearing that. She doesn't have to, but she does have to hear it. He didn't argue. After we hung up, I packed a bag. I called Molly and asked if the spare room she'd mentioned, the one near the youth center, was still available. She said yes. That evening, Lydia showed up with more cookies, laughing about a failed math test and a new crush on a boy who liked vinyl. I handed her the letter. She read it. Her face fell, then hardened. She doesn't get to decide this. No, I said, but she tried. What are you going to do? I already did it. I'm moving. Her eyes widened. Out of Crestview? Across the street from the youth center, a room with light and space for my guitar. She stared, stunned, then smiled slowly. Can I help you move? You already have. We packed that weekend. Julian came by quieter than usual. He carried boxes without complaint. He didn't bring Melissa. When he saw the letter on my desk, he picked it up, folded it, and put it in his coat pocket. I'll talk to her, he said. You don't need to anymore. I looked at him, really looked, and for the first time in years, he looked back without flinching. Later, as I shut off the lights in my Crestview room for the last time, I ran my fingers over the doorframe. It wasn't sadness that filled me. It was something steadier. Conviction. Outside, Lydia waited by the car, guitar in hand, and the porch light was still on. That simple glow, warm, unwavering, met me like an old friend. The new room wasn't much, a kitchenette, a twin bed, 2 wide windows facing west, but it was mine. Not borrowed, not tolerated. Chosen. Molly had stocked the fridge with eggs, bread, and strong coffee. On the counter sat a ceramic mug with faded lettering. Keep strumming. I figured you'd want one less reason to go back, she said with a wink. That first night in the new place, I played until my fingers numbed. Not for anyone, not for memory. Just to fill the room with something that felt like breath. Lydia came by the next day, humming one of our half-finished songs. We sat on the floor, surrounded by unopened boxes, eating crackers and cheese from a paper plate. I like it here, she said. It smells like wood and something old. Me, probably. She grinned. By Friday, I'd set up a corner in the youth center for the kids to record. Nothing fancy, just a USB mic, some foam on the walls, an old laptop Molly dug up from storage. But they lined up to use it, scribbling lyrics in spiral notebooks, testing melodies under their breath. Tara came back. This time, she brought 2 friends. One had a voice like gravel soaked in sunlight. You sound like you've been hurt, I told her. She nodded. I have. Good, I said, then sing like you survived. Word spread. Not far, not loud, but enough. Enough that on a rainy Tuesday a reporter from the local paper showed up. She asked if she could sit in on a session. I said yes, as long as she listened more than she typed. The article ran 2 days later. Old strings, new voices, a musician's second act. It was kind, generous even, but it stirred something I hadn't expected. Melissa showed up at the youth center that Saturday. I was alone in the main room, cleaning strings with a cloth when she walked in. Her heels clacked against the tile like punctuation. "I read the article," she said. "I figured." She looked around. Walls covered in flyers, kids' art, quotes from folk singers. Her mouth was tight. "I'm not here to argue." "Good," I said. She reached into her purse and handed me an envelope. For a moment my chest tightened. Another letter? But it was a check. "I want to support the program," she said flatly. "Whatever this is." I stared at it. Her name on the top. 4 figures. Why? Because Lydia hasn't stopped smiling in 3 weeks. Because Julian won't shut up about your damn songs. Because I was wrong. I set the check on the table between us. "I don't want your apology in ink," I said. She blinked. "I want you to come back. Not to me. To her. To your daughter. Sit with her when she plays. Listen." "She doesn't want me there." "She wants to be seen." Melissa looked down. Something in her shoulders dropped. "I'll try." I nodded. "That's enough." She turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Do you forgive me?" I didn't answer right away. Then, "I don't need to." I let it go. That night I took the check, walked it to Molly's desk, and slid it under her notebook with a note. "Use it for the kids. Not for me." When I stepped outside, the rain had stopped. The clouds pulled apart just enough to let a little silver through, and somewhere in the distance I heard laughter echo off wet pavement. It wasn't mine, but it was enough. Enough to quiet the years of silence. Enough to soften Melissa's gaze the next time she brought Lydia by. Enough to make room for something that wasn't reconciliation, not exactly, but trust. Reshaped. It also made room for someone else. Her name was Nadine. She worked part-time at the library across from the youth center, ran the poetry nights Molly kept inviting me to, and I kept declining. She had short gray curls and a laugh like static on a warm radio. The first time she stopped by the center, she was dropping off a box of used books, memoirs and music theory guides, and a weathered copy of Catcher in the Rye with dog-eared pages. "You're the guy with the guitar," she said, pointing. "And you're the one who thinks kids read about chords," I replied. She laughed. "No, but they might if you tell them to." We didn't click, not right away. It was more like 2 old tools left on the same workbench, worn, sturdy, too stubborn to pretend to be new. She started showing up on Thursdays, not to help, just to sit in the corner with a thermos and a red pen, scribbling edits into poems kids slipped under her office door. One afternoon I caught her humming along while Tara sang a cover of Leonard Cohen. "You know that song?" I asked. "I know all the good ones." "Then sing one." She didn't hesitate, just stepped up and took the mic from Tara with a nod. Her voice was huskier than mine, with edges like wind through gravel, but it carried. Afterward, she looked at me. "You harmonize?" "Used to." "Then start again." That became our thing. Thursday duets, sometimes classics, sometimes new. Sometimes we forgot the words and made up verses on the spot. The kids loved it. Molly started calling us the Silver Notes. One evening as we packed up, Nadine turned to me. "You know," she said, "this place, it's more than noise." "I know. It's what happens when people decide not to disappear." I didn't answer, just nodded. She squeezed my shoulder. "You're still choosing, Pete." That stuck with me. I saw less of Julian, but more of Lydia. She brought friends. Then the friends brought instruments. Someone donated a second mic. Tara started organizing weekly showcases, small, unpolished, brave. They asked me to close the first one with a song. I agreed, but I didn't close it alone. Nadine stood beside me on that tiny stage in the rec room, our backs to the mismatched string lights, the audience cross-legged on gym mats and folding chairs. We sang Turn Me Around, one of the old band's lesser-known tracks, one I hadn't touched in 30 years. When it ended, the room didn't erupt. It sighed, a long, grateful breath. Afterward, while we sipped lukewarm cider in the hallway, Nadine leaned in. "You got more songs in you." "Maybe. You got more life in you, too." That night I found myself staring at the peace lily again, its leaves stretching toward the window, green and quiet. I picked up my notebook and started something new. Not a song this time, a letter. Not for Julian or Melissa, Not even for Lydia. For me. A list, really. Things I had thought were over. Performing, teaching, belonging, being wanted, being seen, and beneath it, one line scribbled in ink that smudged just slightly where my hand trembled. Wrong. About all of it. I read those words the next morning like a confession to myself. Except there was no guilt in them, just clarity, a kind of late-life truth that doesn't demand apology, only acknowledgement. The apartment came together slowly. Molly helped find a carpenter to mount shelves for my records. Lydia painted the baseboards sky blue one Saturday and left a handprint in the corner, which I never covered. Nadine brought me thrifted curtains and a rug with guitars stitched into the fabric, too loud for my taste, but warm underfoot. The biggest change came in spring. The building owner offered the space next door, a narrow unit that once served as a tailor shop, for a creative extension. As Molly put it, I wasn't sure at first, but the kids needed more room, and Nadine had a vision. So we gutted it, tore down the shelves, opened the back wall into the alley for more light, painted everything ivory and steel blue. Molly crowdfunded studio gear. Julian installed a proper soundboard. Nadine labeled everything with handwritten tags that made me smile. String bin, emotion mic, lyric ink. We called it the Echo Room. The sign went up a week before the opening showcase, white lettering on stained wood, mounted above the front window. It looked like it had always belonged there. The night before our first public session, I sat on the little bench outside with Nadine, watching the streetlights blink on. Across the road, a couple pushed a stroller. From the youth center's courtyard came the sound of a girl practicing scales. "I'm scared," I said. "Of what?" "That it's too late for this." Nadine shook her head. "You're not building a future for yourself, Pete. You're building a present for everyone else." I looked at the window, our reflections blurred behind the glass. "Funny," I said. "I used to think legacy was what you left behind." "It is," she said, "but only if you stop living." Inside, everything was ready. Tara had printed programs. Lydia set up chairs. Even Melissa had offered to bring brownies. At 7 the next evening, the place filled. Parents, kids, old neighbors, strangers. A boy from the high school jazz band opened with a trumpet solo. A girl named Nia read a poem about learning to speak without permission. Julian got up next, guitar in hand, and played the song he wrote with Lydia, his voice rough but honest. When it was my turn, I stood in the center of the room, no mic, no spotlight. "I wrote this last week," I said, for everyone who ever wondered if the best parts of them had already passed. I played slow, just 3 chords, but the chorus was strong, and when I finished, the room didn't clap right away. It just held still, like no one wanted to break it. Then someone started, then another. The applause wasn't thunderous, it was tender, earned. Afterward, Lydia threw her arms around me. "You sound younger," she whispered. I didn't say anything. I just held her, like maybe time really could bend backwards sometimes. Later that night, when the chairs were stacked and the floor swept, I lingered alone. I turned off the lights one by one. Left the back door cracked. The Echo Room, silent again, but not empty, never empty now. I locked the front door and stood on the sidewalk, letting the spring air settle around me. It was late, nearly midnight, but I didn't feel tired, just full. In the way music fills a room after the final chord, and the way light lingers on a stage even after the bulbs are dimmed. That night I didn't walk straight home. I took the long way, past Crestview, past the library, past the park bench where Donnie once dared me to busk during a snowstorm in '77. The streets of Des Moines hummed their quiet rhythm. Distant engines, the shuffle of leaves, a dog barking once, then falling silent. When I reached my apartment, I didn't go inside right away. I sat on the steps and watched the windows of the Echo Room across the street glow faintly under the streetlight. In one of them, a paper star cutout Lydia made still hung from fishing line, twirling in the breeze from the cracked open skylight. It turned slowly, like it had nowhere to be. I pulled out my notebook and flipped to the last page. There was space left, just enough. I didn't write a song, not this time, just a sentence. If I died tomorrow, it would be with sound in my chest. And I meant it, but I wasn't dying. I was just finally done living for everyone else. I thought about the man I was when Julian dropped me at Crestview, the quietness I mistook for peace, the slow decay I convinced myself was normal. I thought about the look in his eyes that day, not cruelty, not even shame, just absence. Like I had already become someone else's memory. And now? Now Lydia brought her friends to Grandpa's studio. Now Tara quoted my advice like scripture. Now Nadine argued with me about the difference between a bridge and a refrain, and left her reading glasses in my kitchen. Now Melissa offered to help organize a fundraiser for the next set of instruments. Now Julian texted me song ideas. Now I belong to something again, not a stage, not a band, but a small, beating community. One built not on nostalgia, but on presence, and presence is what had been missing all along. I stood up, joints creaking, but with less protest than usual. I went inside, turned on the lamp, and poured a glass of water. The apartment smelled faintly of pine and old wood, familiar, gentle. I placed my guitar back on its stand and looked at the peace lily. 2 new leaves had sprouted. I smiled. I didn't have a grand finale in mind, no explosive send-off, no curtain call, just days like this, small, real, filled with sound and softness, and maybe, someday, Lydia would sing one of our songs to her own child. Maybe Julian would sit in the back of a crowded room, guitar on his knee, waiting for his cue. Maybe Nadine would publish her collection and leave me a copy with dog-eared pages and a note that said, "You were always part of the poem." Or maybe not. Maybe this was it, and maybe it was enough. I turned off the lamp. The room darkened, and then, quiet, steady, I heard music. It was faint, drifting from the youth center courtyard where someone, brave or forgetful, had left the speakers on low. A melody I didn't recognize, young, unpolished, full of life. I didn't close the window, I just listened, and in that stillness, I found something I never knew I was waiting for. Not applause, not redemption, peace. Real and quiet, mine at last,